The tavern stank of old smoke, sour sweat, and spilled drinks. The light was dim, flickering from broken lanterns that hung unevenly on the walls. She sat on the ground near the door, her head lowered, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her body was wide and soft compared to others of her kind. She knew what they whispered about her. Too wide, too full, too soft, not fit for anything. Her stepfather's heavy hand landed on her shoulder, squeezing hard enough to make her wince. "Stand up," he growled, his voice thick with liquor. "Tonight you'll finally be of some use." Her stomach tightened. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. His grip pushed her forward through the thick smoke of the tavern. The alien men sitting around the wooden tables looked at her and laughed. Their teeth glowed faintly in the lamplight, sharp and mocking. She tried to keep her eyes on the ground, but their laughter burned her skin like fire. Her stepfather shoved her into the center of the room. "Too big to breed," he spat to the crowd. "Too heavy for work, but strong enough to drink away." His lips curled as he raised an empty jug. "1 bottle. That's all. Who wants her?" The laughter grew louder. Coins clinked, mugs slammed. No one wanted her for real. They only wanted to laugh at her. She felt her cheeks burn. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. Then the door creaked. A new figure stepped in. Cloaked, tall, face hidden in shadow. The tavern's noise fell into silence for a brief second. The stranger's boots tapped slowly on the floor as he walked straight toward her stepfather. Without a word, he set a bottle down on the table. The stepfather's eyes gleamed as he snatched it up, uncorked it, and took a long, burning gulp. The liquid dripped down his chin. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She's yours," he said. His hand shoved her hard toward the cloaked figure. She stumbled, catching herself before falling to the dirty floor. She dared to look up at the stranger. His face remained hidden under the hood, but she felt a pair of eyes lock on her. Not mocking, not cruel. Heavy with something she couldn't understand. The tavern crowd cheered and shouted. Someone banged a mug on the table. Someone else whistled. Her stepfather didn't look at her anymore. The bottle in his hand was all he cared about. She felt the tears rising, but she bit her lip until the taste of iron filled her mouth. She would not cry here, not in front of them. The cloaked figure reached out and took her arm gently. His grip was firm, but not cruel. For the first time in years, a touch did not carry pain. Confused, she let herself be pulled toward the door. The noise of the tavern followed them, echoing with laughter and jeers. Outside, the night air was cold. The street was empty, covered in dust and broken signs. She turned to look back once, just once, to see her stepfather lift the bottle again, already forgetting she existed. Her heart clenched, not from love but from the final truth. She had been sold like trash, traded for drink. Her feet dragged as the cloaked figure led her further into the dark. Fear gnawed at her stomach. Who was this stranger? What did he want? She had heard stories of men who bought girls like her, stories filled with screams and chains. Her pulse raced. She tried to pull her arm back, but his grip only tightened slightly, enough to keep her near. They reached the edge of the street where shadows grew deeper. The stranger stopped, finally lowering his hood. She froze. His face was unlike any she had ever seen. The skin was pale compared to her kind, the eyes sharp yet strangely calm. A human. Her breath caught. She had heard of humans before, strange outsiders whispered about in markets. Dangerous, unpredictable, impossible to trust. Her fear doubled. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. His voice was rough but calm. "I had to take you from him." She blinked, her mind spinning. His words did not match the world she knew. Why would anyone care what happened to her? Her stepfather's voice still rang in her head. Too wide, too full, too soft. Worthless. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The human studied her for a moment. His gaze was not cruel, not mocking. It made her feel bare, as if he saw the truth she hid from everyone else. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "You're safe now," he said, though his eyes flicked toward the street behind them. Safe. The word echoed in her mind, strange and heavy. She wanted to believe it, but the sound of boots echoed faintly from the tavern. Her stepfather's drunken laugh carried into the night, mixed with angry shouts. The human's jaw tightened. He pulled the hood back over his head and glanced down the road. "We need to move," he he whispered. His hand brushed her arm again, urging her forward. Her heart raced. Every step away from the tavern felt like stepping into unknown darkness. Behind her, the laughter grew sharper, louder. Men spilled out of the tavern, their voices calling her name, calling for her body, calling for their prize. She shivered. She looked up at the human leading her away, and for the first time she wondered, had she been saved, or had she only traded one danger for another? The night pressed heavy around them as they moved quickly through the broken streets. The human kept his hood low, his steps fast and sure. She tried to match his pace, but her wide frame made her slower. Every sound behind them made her heart jump. She could hear voices from the tavern, angry and drunk, echoing down the alleys. Her stepfather's voice cut through all of them, shouting that she was his and no stranger could take her away. The human stopped suddenly at a corner and pulled her close against the wall. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. He leaned slightly, peering down the dark alley where shadows stretched long. Two figures stumbled out from the tavern, carrying torches, their laughter sharp and cruel. They were searching. She tried to make herself smaller, pressing her back hard against the wall. The human raised a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wanted to believe him when he said she was safe, but the danger was too near. The drunken voices moved closer, the glow of torches flickering across the stones, the smell of smoke mixed with the night air. She held her breath, praying they would pass without looking into the shadows. The men staggered by, cursing and laughing, talking about the drink and the girl who had been sold. One spat on the ground, saying she was not worth even a half-empty bottle. Her eyes burned at the words, but she forced herself to stay silent. The human did not move until the torches were far away and the voices faded. Only then did he step out and pull her along again. She looked at him as they hurried forward. His face was calm, his eyes sharp, scanning every street they crossed. He had no reason to risk himself for her. Why did he? She wanted to ask, but her voice stayed locked in her throat. He glanced back at her once and seemed to read her question anyway. I don't want anything from you, he said quietly as they slipped into another alley. I only couldn't watch him sell you like that. His words stunned her. She almost tripped on a loose stone. No one had ever said such a thing. Everyone in her life had wanted something from her, even if it was just to use her for laughter and shame. She stared at him, trying to see if he was lying, but his eyes were steady, serious, and strangely gentle. They reached the old part of the market where half the stalls were broken, their cloth roofs torn by wind. The streets were empty now, except for the faint scurrying of night creatures. The human led her through narrow paths between stacked crates and barrels. He moved like he had walked these streets before, like he knew every hiding place. Behind them, more shouts echoed. Her stepfather had gathered others. The sound of boots striking stone grew louder. Torches lit the night once again, spreading long shadows that chased them. Her heart pounded harder. This way, the human whispered, pulling her through a gap between two collapsed stalls. She squeezed through, the wood scraping her arms. Her body was too wide, too full, just like they always said. She got stuck for a moment, panic rising in her throat. She pushed hard, her breath sharp, and finally slipped through. On the other side, she bent over, gasping. The human looked at her, his brow furrowed, but he said nothing cruel. He only placed a hand on her shoulder briefly. That single touch steadied her more than words could. He motioned again, and they pressed on. They reached the edge of the market where the ruined shipyard stood, a graveyard of old metal hulls and broken machines. The air smelled of rust and oil. Dark shapes of abandoned ships loomed around them like giants sleeping. The human guided her deeper inside, weaving between the shadows. She shivered as the night grew colder. Her legs ached, but she forced herself to keep going. Every time she thought they had lost the voices, another shout carried through the air, closer than before. They were being hunted. Finally, the human stopped beside the shell of an old cargo ship. Its doors hung open, and the inside was filled with darkness. He pulled her inside and shut the door as quietly as possible. The air inside was damp and smelled of dust, but at least it was hidden. Stay low, he said softly. His eyes flicked to the cracks in the metal wall where faint torchlight glowed outside. She crouched beside him, her body trembling. The shouts outside grew louder. Her stepfather's voice boomed with anger. "Find them! She belongs to me!" The words stabbed into her chest. She hugged her knees, tears pressing at her eyes, but she bit them back. The human leaned close, his whisper steady. "He doesn't own you. Not anymore." The footsteps outside grew nearer, heavy against the broken ground. Torchlight flashed through the cracks, painting the dark room in shifting lines of fire. The human reached for a piece of scrap metal lying beside him, gripping it like a weapon. His eyes were sharp, ready. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they would hear it. She held her breath, staring at the door as shadows passed across it. The wood creaked. Someone pushed against it. The human's muscles tensed. He raised the scrap metal slowly, his knuckles white around it. She pressed her back against the cold wall, fear crawling up her spine. The voices outside grew louder, the laughter harsher. The door shuddered as another hand slammed against it. She closed her eyes, waiting for it to break. The human's jaw clenched, his body still as stone, ready to strike. The silence stretched thin, heavy, and sharp. Then the door creaked again, louder this time. She opened her eyes wide, her breath caught in her chest, knowing that in the next moment, everything would change. The door shook under another push, the wood groaning as if ready to split. She pressed her hands to her mouth to stop a cry from escaping. The human's body leaned forward, his weapon raised high, his eyes locked on the door. Outside, voices argued, torches crackled, and boots scraped over the metal ground of the old shipyard. "Check inside," one voice barked, sharp with command. Her stomach turned cold. She knew what would happen if they were found. Her stepfather would drag her back, mocking her weight, calling her worthless. Then he would sell her again, maybe this time for even less than a bottle. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the dark could swallow her. The human's voice was low and steady. "When the door opens, stay behind me. Do not run." She nodded without thinking, though fear burned her throat. The door creaked again, harder this time. But just as it was about to swing open, another shout rang from the far side of the shipyard. A crash followed, like metal collapsing. The footsteps outside paused, voices shouting at each other. "They went that way," another man called, his voice echoing through the ruined ships. The door was left untouched. The group outside turned, running toward the noise. The sound of boots and torches grew distant. Only silence remained, broken by her shaky breathing. The human lowered the scrap metal length, his shoulders finally relaxing, his face calm but his eyes sharp with thought. "We need to move. They'll be back when they realize it was a trick of the wind." She pushed herself up slowly, her legs weak. Her body felt heavy, but she followed him as he slid the door open and slipped into the night again. The shipyard stretched before them, filled with broken shadows. Metal frames rose high, twisted and sharp like bones. Rust creaked in the cold wind. He led her through narrow passages between fallen beams and old hulls. Every sound seemed louder than it was. Her breath, her footsteps, the scrape of stone under her sandals. She felt like the darkness itself was watching. At one point, she stumbled on a piece of jagged scrap. Pain shot up her leg as her foot twisted. She gasped, grabbing the side of a metal wall to steady herself. He stopped instantly, turning back to her. "You're hurt?" His voice was tight, but not cruel. She shook her head quickly. "I can walk." His eyes lingered on her for a moment. Then, without warning, he crouched and motioned for her to climb onto his back. Her eyes widened. "No, I am too." "Quiet," he interrupted. "They'll hear us if you limp." Her throat tightened, too wide, too full, too heavy. That was what everyone said. But his eyes held no mockery, only urgency. Hesitantly, she placed her arms around his shoulders. He lifted her with surprising strength, like her body pressed against his back. She expected him to stagger, to curse, but instead he moved forward with steady steps. The sound of his breathing was calm, controlled. She buried her face against his shoulder, too ashamed to speak. The silence of the shipyard wrapped around them as he carried her deeper into the ruins. The night air bit against her skin, cold and sharp, but the warmth of his body kept her steady. Behind them, distant shouts rose again. The hunters were searching the far end of the yard now. Their torches glowed faintly like angry stars. The human lowered her gently behind a large rusted engine. He crouched beside her, eyes scanning the shadows. "We'll rest here for a moment." She pulled her knees to her chest still tight with shame. "I slow you down," she whispered. He turned his head to her. His face was half hidden in shadow, but his voice was clear. "You are not slowing me. You are surviving." The words stunned her. No one had ever said something like that. Surviving. She hugged her knees tighter, unsure why her chest hurt in a way that was not only fear. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approached again. The glow of torches swept across the walls of broken metal. Voices echoed closer. "She can't be far," her stepfather shouted. "Big as she is, she leaves a trail like a beast." The human's jaw tightened. He motioned for her to stay low as he picked up another piece of metal from the ground. His grip was steady, his eyes locked on the path ahead. The hunters spread out, their shadows stretching long across the wreckage. One of them stepped too close to their hiding place. She held her breath, her heart pounding like thunder. The human crouched, ready to strike. The hunter stopped, sniffing the air. Then he turned, torchlight flashing across his sharp teeth. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. Her fingers dug into the rusted ground. Her lungs ached from holding back her breath. The silence was unbearable, stretched to breaking. Then a sudden clang echoed from the far end of the yard, metal crashing down, loud and sharp. The hunter snapped his head toward the noise, shouting to the others, "Over there!" The footsteps rushed away, the glow of torches fading once again. The human lowered the weapon slowly, his chest rising and falling with a long breath. He glanced at her, his voice quiet but certain. "We can't keep hiding. Next time, they'll find us." She nodded, fear still heavy inside her. He leaned closer, his whisper a promise. "Trust me, I have a plan." Her eyes locked on his. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something beyond fear, a thin thread of hope in the darkness. The plan was simple, but simple did not mean safe. The human led her deeper into the shipyard until they reached a wide open space where broken engines and cracked metal walls formed a circle like an arena. The night was colder here, and the stars above peeked through the holes in the roof. He crouched low, scanning the area. His voice was steady but soft. "They will corner us no matter where we hide. Better we choose the place than wait for them to find us." Her hands trembled as she hugged herself. "We can't fight them all." He looked at her, his eyes sharp in the dim light. "You can. You just don't believe it yet." She shook her head, whispering, "I am too big, too soft, too slow. I only make you weaker." A faint smile touched his lips, not mocking but firm. "That's what they told you. That's what he told you. But I saw your strength when you pushed through the stall back in the market. You are not weak." Before she could answer, the sound of boots echoed through the shipyard. Dozens of them. Torches burned like angry fireflies, drawing closer with every step. Her stepfather's drunken voice cut through the night. "There! I smell her fear!" The human stood, lifting a heavy metal bar from the ground. He held it like a sword. His jaw was set, his shoulders tense. He looked back at her once more. "Stay close. And when it is time, don't hold back." The first of the gang entered the circle of wreckage, grinning with sharp teeth. "Look at this," one of them sneered, pointing at her. "She's too wide to hide." Laughter spread through the men. Her stepfather shoved to the front, his face red, his eyes wild with drink. "Bring her back! She's mine!" His spit flew as he shouted, "This human has no claim. She belongs to me." The human stepped forward, blocking their view of her. His voice was like steel. "She belongs to no one." The crowd roared with anger, and then they rushed forward. The first attacker swung a jagged blade. The human ducked and struck with the metal bar, the sound of bone cracking loud in the air. Another lunged, but he twisted, kicking him hard in the stomach. 2 went down, but 5 more rushed in. She gasped as she watched him fight. He was strong, quick, clever, but there were too many. They circled him like wolves, torches throwing wild light on their snarling faces. One struck from behind, the blade cutting across his arm. Blood darkened his sleeve. Her heart leapt in panic. He stumbled but did not fall. He swung again, striking another to the ground, but his breath grew heavier. Her stepfather laughed, a cruel sound that made her chest burn. "See, he cannot protect you. You're nothing but a burden, too heavy for even a human to carry." She felt the words like knives. All her life, she had been told the same. Too much, too slow, too useless. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to shut it out. But then she saw the human, blood dripping down his arm, still standing between her and the gang, still fighting with everything he had. Something inside her snapped. She rose to her feet, her wide frame casting a shadow across the broken ground. Her stepfather sneered at her. "What will you do? Sit on us?" The men laughed again, but she no longer heard the laughter. Her fear melted into something hot, something wild. She roared, a deep sound that shook her chest, and charged forward. The first man who reached for her never had time to scream. Her arms swung out, striking him hard enough to send him crashing into the metal wall. Another leaped at her with a knife, but she caught his wrist and squeezed until the blade clattered to the ground and his bones cracked beneath her grip. She threw him aside like broken wood. The gang hesitated, their laughter fading. She grabbed a fallen pipe from the ground, heavier than what any of them could lift, and swung it wide. Two men went flying, their torches scattering sparks. Her stepfather's eyes widened, his drunken grin fading into fear. "No, no, you're too strong," the human finished for him, his voice steady even as blood ran down his arm. He looked at her with something fierce in his eyes, not fear, not pity, but pride. Her chest heaved as she stood tall, the broken pipe in her hands. The men circled again, but more carefully this time, their eyes darting between her and the human. She could feel her body trembling, not with weakness, but with power she had never allowed herself to believe in. Her stepfather tried to rally them, shouting curses, spitting rage. "She's nothing! Take her down!" But the gang no longer laughed. They moved slower now, fear in their eyes. The human stepped closer to her side, his voice low. "See? You're not too much. You're enough." She tightened her grip on the pipe, lifting her chin. For the first time in her life, she believed him. The gang hesitated, torches flickering in the cold wind. Then one by one, they backed away. Her stepfather stood frozen, his bottle gone, his power gone. He stumbled back, pointing at her with a shaking hand. This isn't over," he shouted before vanishing into the dark. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of her breath and the dripping of blood from the human's arm. She dropped the pipe with a loud clang, her body shaking from the storm inside her. The human touched her shoulder, his voice gentle now. "You saved me. You saved yourself." She looked at him, her eyes wet, her chest tight. The words she wanted to say would not form. But deep inside, something had changed. For the first time, she felt more than fear, more than shame. She felt free. They walked in silence after the fight, leaving the broken shipyard behind. The night was still cold, and the wind whistled through the empty streets. Her body ached from the sudden strength she had used, but inside something felt lighter. For the first time, she had not been mocked into silence. For the first time, she had pushed back. The human's arm bled where the blade had cut him. She kept glancing at the wound, her lips pressing together. Finally, she stopped walking. "You're hurt," she whispered. He looked down at his arm as if noticing it only now. "It's nothing," but the blood dripped steadily, dark against the night. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for his sleeve. He tensed at her touch, but did not pull away. She tore a strip from the hem of her own dress and wrapped it around his arm, tying it as tightly as she could. Her stepfather's voice still echoed in her head, calling her worthless. Yet here she was, tending to someone who had bled for her. She swallowed hard, afraid to meet his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, breaking the silence. Her chest tightened at the words. No one had ever thanked her before. They found shelter in the remains of an old storage station on the edge of the city. The roof was half gone, and rusted metal beams crossed like broken ribs overhead. But it was dry, and it gave them cover. The human lowered himself onto a crate, wincing as his arm brushed the wall. She sat across from him, pulling her knees close. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind outside and the faint crackle of fire from a torch they had taken. She studied his face in the dim glow. He was different from every other man she had known. His eyes carried no hunger, no cruelty, only weight, as if he carried more than one life's worth of burdens. Finally, she found her voice. "Why did you save me?" He looked at her steadily. "Because you needed saving." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say she wasn't worth it, but his eyes silenced her. She lowered her gaze, ashamed of the heat in her chest. "You're not what he said you are," he added, his tone firm. "Not too big, not too soft. You're strong. Stronger than any of them." Her heart pounded. She shook her head. "You don't know me." "I've seen enough," he replied. The words sat heavy between them. She wrapped her arms around herself, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had looked at her like that. Outside, the sound of voices grew faint. Soldiers now marched through the city, answering her stepfather's cries. The human's jaw tightened as he listened. He won't give up. He'll find a way to claim you again. She shivered. Then what do we do? He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. We run, but first you must choose. Do you want to go back and live as his, or will you walk with me into the unknown? Her chest rose and fell, each breath sharp. She thought of the tavern, of the mocking laughter, of her stepfather's hand pushing her into the dirt. She thought of tonight, of lifting a man into the air and throwing him aside like broken wood. She thought of this human, bloodied but unshaken, who stood in front of her when everyone else had stepped away. Her voice came out small but steady. I'll walk with you. A flicker of relief passed over his face. He nodded. Then we'll move at first light. That night, she lay curled in the corner of the station, staring at the broken beams above. Sleep would not come. The sound of his slow breathing across from her gave her a strange comfort. She watched the faint glow of the torch fade to embers. The memory of his words circled in her mind. Not too big, not too soft, strong. The warmth of those words stayed with her long after the fire died. Morning came gray and cold. She rose before him, her body stiff but her mind clearer than it had ever been. For the first time, she did not hide her wide frame. She stood tall as the sunlight touched her skin through the gaps in the roof. The human opened his eyes and studied her. He said nothing at first, only nodded slightly as if he understood what had shifted inside her. They left the station together, moving through side streets to avoid soldiers. The city was waking, vendors opening stalls, carts rolling over stones, but whispers already spread of the girl who had fought like a beast in the shipyard, of the human who stood with her. Her stepfather's voice rose over the noise of the streets as he shouted to the commander of the soldiers. He pointed at her with wild eyes. She's mine. The humans stole her. The commander's gaze was hard, his armor shining in the morning light. He looked from her to the human, then raised a hand. Soldiers closed in, surrounding them on all sides. Her stomach dropped. The human stepped in front of her again, shoulders squared despite his wound. The commander's voice was sharp. If the claim is true, the girl must be returned. The crowd pressed closer, eager to see the judgment. Her stepfather sneered, his grin wide, already tasting victory. The human's voice rang out clear and defiant. She is no man's property. She chooses her own life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The commander's eyes narrowed. Then let her prove it. By law, her freedom must be won. Her stepfather's laughter filled the air. She can't even walk straight without shame. She'll never win. Her hands clenched at her sides. Fear twisted in her stomach. But beneath it burned something stronger. She looked at the human, who only nodded once, his eyes steady. Her heart steadied with his silent promise. She turned back to the commander, her voice trembling but loud enough for all to hear. I will prove it. The crowd gathered quickly, filling the square with restless voices. Soldiers stood in a line, their spears bright in the morning light. The commander raised his hand, and silence fell. His eyes were cold as he looked at her. By law, you must face the trial of strength. If you win, you are free. If you fail, you return to the one who claims you. Her stepfather smirked from across the square, his bottle already in hand. She'll fail before the first strike. Too heavy, too slow. Just watch. Her chest tightened, but she lifted her chin. The human stood behind her, his injured arm wrapped in cloth. His voice was low, only for her. Do not listen to him. He fears you. That's why he shouts so loud. She nodded, drawing a shaky breath. The commander motioned to the center of the square where a circle had been marked on the ground with white chalk. 3 large warriors stepped forward, their bodies tall and sharp like blades. Their armor gleamed, and each carried a staff heavy with iron. The crowd cheered at the sight, eager for spectacle. She stepped into the circle, her bare feet pressing into the dust. Her wide frame cast a long shadow, and whispers rose from the people. Too wide, too soft, too full. She heard every word, but she forced herself not to lower her head. The first warrior moved fast, swinging the staff at her side. She raised her arm, the impact rattling her bones, but she held firm. Pain shot through her, yet she did not fall. The crowd gasped as she pushed back, sending the warrior stumbling a few steps. Her stepfather barked a laugh. Luck, that's all. The second warrior charged. His staff struck her leg, and she fell to one knee. Dust rose around her as the crowd shouted. Her arms trembled as she pushed herself back up. For a moment, doubt crept in, whispering that maybe they were right. Then she caught sight of the human's face in the crowd. His eyes did not waver. He gave a small nod, steady and sure. Strength surged through her chest. She rose fully, gripping the fallen piece of staff from the ground. The wood felt heavy in her hands, but it was hers now. When the warrior charged again, she swung wide. The strike cracked across his chest, sending him sprawling onto the ground. The crowd gasped again, voices mixing in shock and disbelief. The last warrior snarled and rushed her. He was faster than the others, his staff whistling through the air. He struck her shoulder, the blow so strong she cried out, nearly dropping her weapon. The crowd roared with excitement, waiting for her to collapse. Her stepfather raised his bottle high, already celebrating. "She's finished!" But she wasn't. She gritted her teeth and gripped her weapon tighter. The human's voice echoed in her memory. "You are not too much. You are enough." The warrior swung again, but this time she stepped aside, her wide body moving with surprising speed. She brought her staff down hard on his weapon, snapping it in two. The pieces clattered across the ground. With a roar, she slammed her shoulder into him, knocking him flat on his back. The circle shook with the sound. Dust rose high as the crowd fell silent. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the commander's voice rang out, loud and clear. "She has won." The silence broke into chaos. Some cheered, some cursed, but all were stunned. Her stepfather's face twisted with rage. "No! This cannot be!" He stumbled forward, pointing at her with a trembling hand. "She is nothing. She cannot be free." The commander's hand rose, silencing him. "She is free, by law and by strength." Her stepfather's bottle slipped from his hand, shattering against the stones. His face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. She stood tall in the circle, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Sweat streaked her face, her arms ached, but inside, a fire burned bright. The whispers of too wide, too soft, too full no longer cut into her. They no longer had power. The human pushed through the crowd, his eyes never leaving her. When he reached her, he placed his uninjured hand gently on her arm. His voice was quiet, but every word struck deep. "You proved it. To them, to him, but most of all, to yourself." Her throat tightened. For a moment, she could not speak. She looked around at the faces, some filled with awe, some with envy, some with fear, but for the first time, she didn't shrink under their eyes. The commander spoke again. "The claim is broken. She walks free. The human may leave with her if she chooses." She turned to him, her eyes wet. The words trembled on her lips, but they came out strong. "I choose." Her stepfather screamed, his rage spilling into the air, but no one listened. Soldiers dragged him back as he kicked and cursed, his voice fading into the noise of the crowd. She stepped out of the circle, her head held high, walking beside the human. Every step felt like a new life beginning. She was no longer too much. She was finally enough. The streets buzzed with whispers as they left the square. People stepped aside, some bowing their heads, others staring with wide eyes. She felt every glance, but for the first time they did not cut her. They only confirmed what she had already proven. She walked with her shoulders straight, her wide frame unhidden. The human stayed beside her, his pace steady, his presence solid like stone. They found themselves in the quieter part of the city, where broken walls leaned against each other and old stalls stood empty. The noise of the crowd faded behind them, but the echo of her stepfather's screams lingered in her mind. She knew he would not forget, and men like him did not forgive. Yet, she no longer feared his voice the way she once did. The human stopped near an abandoned house, its roof half gone, its windows covered with cloth. He stepped inside first, checking the corners before calling her in. She entered carefully, her eyes scanning the dim room. Dust floated in the sunlight that broke through cracks in the roof. It was not much, but it felt safe. He lowered himself onto a broken bench, his injured arm heavy at his side. She knelt in front of him, carefully untying the cloth she had wrapped the night before. The wound was red, swollen, but not deep enough to take his strength. She cleaned it with water from a cracked jug she found, her hands gentle, her eyes focused. He studied her face as she worked, but said nothing for a long while. Finally, he broke the silence. "You fought with everything you had today." She pressed the cloth gently against his arm. "I was afraid." His lips curved slightly. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to stand anyway. Her hands paused. She lifted her eyes to his, searching. Do you really think I am strong? His gaze did not waver. Stronger than anyone I have ever seen. The words sank deep into her, settling in places long filled with shame. She lowered her head, her throat tight. For years, she had been told she was too much, too wide, too heavy, too soft. But in his voice, those things were not curses. They were power. When she finished tending to his arm, she sat back, hugging her knees. What happens now? She asked quietly. He leaned against the wall, his eyes thoughtful. You are free. You can choose any path. You owe no one. Her heart twisted. Free. The word sounded strange, like a language she had never spoken before. She looked at him, her voice trembling. And you? Where will you go? He hesitated before answering. I move from place to place. I don't belong anywhere. The thought of him walking away pierced her more sharply than her stepfather's cruelest words. She bit her lip, unsure if she should speak the thought burning inside her. At last she whispered, I don't want to be alone again. His eyes softened. He reached out with his uninjured hand and placed it over hers. His touch was warm, steady. Then you won't be. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not born of shame. She let them fall, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He did not pull away, only held her hand tighter. The day slipped into night. They lit a small fire in the corner, its glow painting the walls with gentle light. She lay near the warmth, her body tired but her spirit restless. Sleep came slowly. When it did, her dreams were filled not with laughter and mockery, but with the echo of his words, You are enough. At dawn, the city stirred again. Shouts rose from the marketplace, the sound of hammers and wheels filling the air. She and the humans slipped out of the abandoned house, walking side by side. The air was fresh, touched by the smell of bread and smoke. For once, the stares of strangers did not make her hide. As they reached the edge of the city, she stopped and looked back. The streets where she had been sold for a drink now stood behind her, fading in the early light. Her stepfather was still out there somewhere, but his chains no longer bound her. She turned forward again, her voice steady. Wherever we go, I will walk with you. The human glanced at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he gave a small nod, his mouth curving into the faintest of smiles. And I will walk with you. They stepped onto the road leading out of the city, the rising sun casting long shadows before them. She felt the weight of her past still pressing on her shoulders, but now it no longer bent her. It made her stand taller. Behind them, whispers would spread through the city of the girl who was too wide, too soft, too full, yet strong enough to break free. Ahead of them, the world stretched wide and uncertain, but for the first time she did not fear it. The human walked beside her, and she carried within her a truth no one could take away. She was not too much. She was not too little. She was exactly enough.